Hello, this is Lisa Lee, and welcome to this week's enrichment reading. I am playing with the format again. I'm trying to figure out how to do this in a way that is easier on my body and might be just like more enjoyable all around. So I've been working with humans, Ascended Masters, and I've thought to work with Ascended Masters before, but working with the gods is kind of like it's an Olympic experience. And I've been thinking a lot about the way that my psychic arts and my psychic training and my psychic self, it was very like combat baby, for lack of a better way of, Wondrous Child, for lack of alchemical wand, for lack of a better way of putting it, there was a sort of combat baby sort of way in which like my psychic abilities developed over time as a young person into like, puberty, and then young adulthood, and then like weird adulthood, and then post weird adulthood. I know you all understand. And so, I've been thinking a lot about that and trying to shift into a like more personable gear, or work with humans for a little while. It's less Olympic, and it's a little bit less world building and more focus on community. And we want to focus on community anyway. And so now, today, this enrichment is the first in our long series on, we're going to begin community standards by having discussions about community standards. And we're going to start having discussions about community standards by working with community leaders, like quite literally. And so last week's reading, we worked with Audre Lorde, and that really opened up a lot for me. It shifted the way that I saw a lot of things. It shifted the way that I saw the work. It shifted the way that it was a like before and an after moment in terms of my way of doing this work, or my way of like engaging with this work at a heart level. In the Mothering series, we talked about purpose in relationship to ecosystem. So to be born into an ecosystem where everything has a purpose is to know that you have a purpose. And we also learned, I think that like another thing that rang very like powerfully true was that the sentience in you comes from the source of life. Like it doesn't come from another place. Like you don't generate the sentience. And so the sentience is with the giver of life. And very practically speaking, the giver of life, without any questions of like spirituality, religion even involved, comes down to like the earth, the planet. The planet we are on gives the earth, it gives the life, like boom, 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 chain of command. And so sentience is a part of that chain of command, and it's a part of that inheritance. And so like once we break down that like everything has this, like once we break down that like sentience is not ours, and it's not just human, it's something that is like a portion of life, or an aspect of the inheritance of life. This moves us into a primal worldview. And we started with a primal worldview. The primal worldview was like the earliest spirituality and the earliest religious systems of like, antiquity, as far back as we can go and as far back as we can chart, we get to the primal worldview. And the primal worldview makes a lot more sense than the worldview of like the individualistic, like, humans at the center of all like consciousness. Like we have a job on this planet, and we're obviously doing something cancerous instead of that particular job. But, everything has a purpose. Like, the honeybee pollinates the earth. What does the human species do? Like, we make this, Audre Lorde's reading, she showed me a picture of like a tribe walking through the forest. And she showed me the picture of the tribe walking through the forest from the perspective of like an observer. And for her, it was like, once you pass on, like you can travel around and be like looking at whatever, that's the beauty of consciousness. Consciousness is that field of what was, like everything that ever was, and outside of the confines of time, everything that will ever be, and it exists within the whole of itself, and those borders like are somewhere, or they don't. Like I think they kind of expand, and I think that's like a movement situation. But overall, consciousness is its own thing. When you have a body, you have a body and consciousness, and when you don't have a body, you have just consciousness. Like it's the disembodied state is the field of consciousness. So you can move all over. Time is no longer binding you. And so when she showed me the humans as a species, she showed me this tribe walking through what looked kind of like a jungle thicket, you know, sort of. And I didn't understand their language, and it was such an early language that, like, you know, so she said, like, it's like clacking, or like, like one time I was talking to a god, and the god said, you know, you sound like a cackling brook, like you're like a bubbling brook, like this is the noise that you make. You bothered me with your like noise, like cackling brook. And so she showed me something very similar to that, and that like this group of human beings that were making this path, so they were like a river, right? And like the conversation that they had to like other species, and the conversations that they were having, they sound like clack 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 clack, like bubbling, like clack clack clack. So if you can think about like the music of language that you don't understand, and especially the complexity of like, and it sounded kind of like clack 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 clack, like, but at different tones, and so it sounded like a river of this weird music, and that's what humans do, and that's what they did, and that's what they make. And so we communicate, and we organize, and we like explore, and we innovate, and so we're this part of the brain that's like the synapse. You know, for a moment you're the form, but consciousness is the impulse that moves through that form. And so that primal worldview, I keep a quote by Richard Tarnas, because I like the way that Richard Tarnas defined the primal worldview in, do you hear that car alarm going off? No, it's the fan. I have like a weird, so my, when I'm in like a trance state, sounds do weird things to me, like sometimes I'm not sure where. It's like a dream state where like the ticking clock in the room turns into a drum in your dream, like, so the fan going around struck me as a car alarm for a second. But the, I'm gonna read that quote from Richard Tarnas's Primal Worldview. So let me just like kind of like adjust my aperture a little bit so I can look at, so I can read this. Okay, so this is the primal worldview, and I think this is the best way it could ever be described, so I just leave it at this description as being the best one. Meaning and purpose are seen as permeating the entire world within which the self is embedded. The primal human walks through a world that is experienced as completely continuous between inner and outer. He or she sees spirits in the forest, perceives meaning in the movement of two eagles across the horizon, recognizes significance in the conjunction of two planets, experiences a world in which the human being is completely embedded in a larger being that is ensouled. The primal worldview is radically ensouled. It communicates and has purposes. It is pregnant with signs and symbols, implications and intentions. The world is animated by the same psychologically resonant realities that the human psychologically resonant realities that the human being experiences within. I'll read that again. The world is animated by the same psychologically resonant realities that the human being experiences within. The human soul participates in a world soul, or anima mundi, and the language of that articulates that anima mundi in all its flux and diversity is the language of myth, the archetypal language of the human psyche. The many particulars of the empirical world are all intrinsically endowed with an archetypal significance, mythic and numinous, and that significance flows between inner and outer self and world without any absolute distinction. That is the primal worldview. And so I believe I am one of the primal worldview. I'm of the belief of the primal worldview because I know that sentience doesn't come from me. I'm a believer of the primal worldview because everything about the earth that does give life does do so in ecosystem, and that's a system that is purposed, you know, and everything has a purpose within it. And so, like, very simply speaking, you know, what it means to like be in that primal worldview is also having license to pray to saints. But what makes a saint, or a saint, like, you know, what makes a saint, right? And so Audre Lorde, I would consider Audre Lorde a saint. And the reason that I would, with the sun here, yes. The reason that I would consider Audre Lorde a saint is because of the level of mastery that she had achieved in her life with the way that she saw the world and the way that she communicated the world and what it meant for her to get to that higher ground, that higher perspective, and really see things clearly. Look at that Six of Swords, Queen of Wands, Seven of Pentacles. Oh, so this is a good place for us to start looking at this. And so when we were working with Audre Lorde and that with that Four of Swords, you know, she showed me a lot about, you know, ways in which like I needed to improve everything. But like more than that, you know, I want to bring you into a different perspective on psychic abilities. And I want to bring you into a perspective on psychic abilities that gives you a lot more permission and a lot more license to really see that, like, you can do exactly what I'm doing. Now, it's not exactly what I'm doing that you can do, because everyone has a different vantage point. I have, I don't even know how I would explain it. Like, I have a diagnosis. If you, like, you know, like, there's types of sight that, how do I explain this? Oh, I talked to Audre Lorde about this, and it's like, some people are like specialties, like they specialize. Some humans and some purposes are specialized, and some purposes are more general, and both have their unique beauty. One is not more beautiful than the other, but the specialized and the general do tend to kind of clash a little bit in terms of like, I don't know. So I was kind of like learning something about this, and I don't know why that even came up. I lost that. I think I'm just jumping off of the like correct channel here for a second. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. It's 8 of Cups, 2 of Swords. Oh yeah, look. See, sometimes we get blocked and we have to stop and like walk away from what we're doing because we got off track. Oh, I want to teach you that you can do exactly what I'm doing. So like, what I'm basically saying is like, my way of doing things comes from like a certain like savanty specialized mind, like a neurodivergence, like a certain tenor that creates a kind of, you know, double vision that then like personifies and blah, 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 blah. But I think that no matter where you're coming from in terms of like how your gifts manifest and how they surface and how they operate, whether specialized or general, like there's work that can be done on like refining a specialized gift so that it's more acute and more like easier to access, and can be like, there's just ways to do that you can really get there and enhance it. And if you have a more generalized gift, that's also just as cool, but in like a different way. But I still think that you can get to where I am from like both places. And so I'm actually, you know, starting to think about this as like, how can I teach you not to rely on me, because I want you to be here and I want to teach you and I want to make a living doing the thing that I love. But like the very fundamental difference between like a spiritual leadership sort of model where you, oh gosh, I just got so freaked out. She's stopping me. So I'm still working with Audrey. She's like, shh. Anyway, I think I can teach you how to do this a little bit if I show you kind of like into the mind of like my madness almost. And I started to think that as I was working with Audrey and I was talking about what it is to do this work and what it is to engage with her work and what it is to have a conversation between my work and her work and what it is to be in, like what her world is like. There was a lot of conversation going on. And I realized that like what I really, really want to do is help you do this in your own unique way. And so, you know, back to this notion of a primal worldview, like belief is permission, and a primal worldview and wrapping your head around this notion of sentience didn't start with you. And so it comes from the giver of life, and the giver of life is very, like, obviously the giver of life, like. And so we have access to these ascended masters, like those who achieved mastery in life. And we can tell by resonance, like who's got mastery, who doesn't have mastery. That mastery to ascended master pipeline is like, that's the thing. That's for no doubt. Like there's no doubt, like zero doubt about it. And so like a saint was a prophet in life, and a prophet can take a lot of forms, and mastery to ascended master like is a thing, and everybody's kind of on that like road. And to sort of be on that road, that's sort of what we're talking about in terms of having a primal worldview, like stepping into this notion of ancestral worship as part of that primal worldview, because we have access to the ancestors, but we also have access to the ascended masters. And so when someone was an ascended master in life, and we are engaging with their work and it's resonating with us and it's resonating with our work, it's, that's like, I think a good way to start to think about channeling and be responsible about it, because oh my god, 8 of Wands, you know, like 10 of Pentacles, 8 of Swords, it's a great idea, but be responsible about it. So I get this like very intense, like let's learn this slowly. Okay, so I'm going to slow down because I have to not have this like speedy pace when I work with Audre Lorde as an ascended master, because she's like, why? Right? All right, so the Hanged Man here is going to be stuck points. And so when we are in community, and when we are working from the primal worldview, and we are engaging with a body of work, and that body of work like resonates very deeply with us. What I did with this, with working with Audre Lorde, and like, you know, reading her work, like Googling and looking up her work, looking up her speeches on YouTube, listening to things. I posted a couple things on Patreon. I think at least like 2 things on Patreon. And my process with her was to because I have visions and I hear voices and I have a primal experience, which is why the primal worldview for me is like a place of acceptance, and it's something that I think I can offer others from a place of belief. The way that it works when I am engaging with any piece of work really, really heavily, especially if I love that work, because I am as psychic as I am, and because my mind works in the way that it does, it's impossible for me to be like really immersed in a piece of work and not start a dialogue with the writer, not start a dialogue. Like, and I'm not talking about the writer if they're still alive. I mean, if the writer is dead and I'm reading their work and I'm really resonating with it, that psychic link is connected. Like it, you know, like it's like the double slit experiment, like the observer, like once that observer locks in and they see that I can see them, because there's always a connection when you love a work, it becomes a conversation. And so I'm having this conversation with her about me and myself and what I want and like what's going on, and like it's prayer. I'm praying, you know, and she's answering that prayer. But a lot of what that answering that prayer is being in conversation with the work that's already established. And so I want to show you a little bit. It's almost like I don't want to call it a life hack or a trick, because I hate for you to take things out of context. If you're going to engage with an author that you love, or a writer that you love, or a spiritual, like even Jesus, like if you're gonna, and people do this with the Bible actually, I think, if you're gonna do it right, again, if you're not doing it, if you're doing it from ambition without any love, or if you're doing it with like not love, if you don't love the God that you're dealing with, if you don't love the art that, like, you know what it is to resonate with a piece of art and fall in love with it. If you don't get a vibe from that art that leads you to the vibe of the person who made it, that like lets you like in reverence and respect, like communicate with them in prayer, you know that you would know it, and like whatever you'd be interacting with would know it. And so like the right way to do this is like, it's purely from an emotional place, and that in the place of resonance, like the work that they have done, you're like, yes, absolutely. And we all have writers that like you're reading and you're like 1,000%. And so I have these, I took two, it was two, I think essays, or no, 2 speeches that I pulled quotes from. And so I'm going to do a conversation, and it's less going to be a conversation where I'm in 2 places at once, channeling through my body the way I always channel through my body. I'm still channeling her, and I'm still channeling her through my body, but I'm doing it with enough of a, like my body needs a break. I need to have my body in a break. And I'm also just going to bring you into like a prayer style. If I had a book in front of me, or if I had the pages in front of me, I could go back and forth at, like I normally would do. Like if I'm reading a book and I read a paragraph, I talk to the author, I read a paragraph, I talk to the author. That would be weird and difficult and like logistically with cards, but with quotes I can do it. And so I'm kind of, it's a little bit of a thing, and those of you who are here kind of know. But we're gonna pull a quote and we're gonna correspond it. Like I'm gonna show you how to do something. So I pulled cards here, and we have 4 of Swords. I am healing from like my body needs a little bit of a break, but I'm also learning a new way to channel, and I'm teaching a new way to channel as I do it, because I think this is super accessible. With the 6 of Swords and the 2 Pentacles here, moving to a new place, moving into calmer waters, going from a storm into like a serene, but there is a balance to be struck here. And so let me get a sip of water. So with this 4 of Swords, we see part of what it was to encounter Audrey's energy last week was to be really overwhelmed by her capacity for love for the people in her life, her capacity for the love that she had for her life, and the capacity of love that she just had like generally. And like the glimpses that I got of her life, there was a lot of conversation and a lot of fun and a lot of like, it was alive. It was a level of alive, and a level of live, and like a kaleidoscope of influences and energies and things that were around her that she interacted with And like me, you know, with the, like, I have to be kind of, I'm going to bring my personal stuff in a little bit so that I can, again, it's like, I want to bring you into the process, you know, so me or any of us really coming from this place of like, you know, like Four of Swords, this particular card, like hiding. Why do we hide? You know, and like, I'm not the only one who hides. I think everybody hides. I think the reason that people hide from the world, and by hide from the world, I mean like we always have to go into a world and we have to present as functional in a certain kind of way. And I'm just going to get a quote here. The third day of Kwanzaa, and the principle for the day is, and forgive me, I was gonna remember to put the pronunciation, but I forgot. Ijima, or Ijima, I want to pronounce that right. Collective work and responsibility, the decision to build and maintain ourselves and our communities together and to recognize and solve our problems together. It's a good quote. And so where are we as a community in general? Where's the world as a community? Because it's not just us. I think it's every community that exists, with the exception of those that operate in familiar roles. So churches operate in familiar roles, you know, certain jobs, there's operating in familiar roles, but there's always, and so like when you have an ability to operate within familiar roles, there's ways of connecting and there's ways of grouping and solving problems and figuring out who your people are in what environment and who they're not. And when there's nobody, there's just like, you know, what it means to observe and what it means to kind of interact at whatever level. And it can be really, really exhausting. But from one of the essays, Audre Lorde was talking about this principle, the third day of Kwanzaa, this principle of, I'm going to get it wrong, but Ujima, collective work and responsibility, the decision to build and maintain ourselves and our communities together and to recognize and solve our problems together. So honestly, because I play and with kind of like a light heart, you know, I think everybody wants to hang out and everybody wants to have fun. And when we're pushed into school or when we're pushed into our, you know, environments that like kind of put us in orbit of each other, there's easy access. But when life, you know, when life kicks in and the responsibilities and the demands of family and the demands of, all of the demands, you know, even if it's just the demand of a job, like a daily job, we like lose steam for each other when the world is extracting so much, when the job is extracting so much, when the roles are extracting so much, we start to lose our energy and our capacity to build communities together and recognize and solve problems together, especially with social media where we have access to like all of the talking points. It's like we're somebody who's like as a collective, if we were in a universe and like we are the brain of the universe, we're stuck in our head and we can't feel our body and we're like looping and like ruminating craziness. Like there's incoherence even in the way that we communicate and find truth in a lot of senses because we're not in relationship with each other. We're not able to solve problems at the level of like interaction. We're so fractioned off and stuck in kind of like, I almost say like a ping pong of point, counterpoint, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, and who's going to get what like ground and what are we going to do and blah, blah, blah. Even the panic and the helplessness and like who's doing what and how. This is so overwhelming because when we think about community activism from the ground level, and when I was talking to Audre Lorde, she was showing me community organizing at the ground level. And she was showing me her and a bunch of women talking in a room. And it was like, it wasn't a fancy, like, you know, there was nothing there. Like, I saw fans and just like as little clothing as possible in a summer day and like a conversation that was like riveting and beautiful and musical with meaning and like poetic and deep and insightful. And it was like the richness of exchange. And it was, and everybody's like faces are like, you know, in relationship to everybody's faces and the sound, and everybody's having the same experience of the heat and the same sound with the fan, and they can hear the music outside. And as the people pass by, you know, there's all this movement, and there's so much to see and pay attention to, and there's so much color, and there's so many ways in which you can shift your attention and just take in the smells of like the sidewalk. And I see us as being in a very different position in the world that we're in and post-pandemic. The pandemic put us inside. And once the pandemic put us inside, I never forget to like stop and take a drink of water. It's always such an awkward thing when I like desperately like need to drink. That says something about the way that I like need to alter my style. But back to this notion of this Four of Swords, like not being able to truly connect, like back into the world, enter back into the world, having seen so many horrors, having had so many experiences, having had so many changes, having been subject to a world that is like rapidly cycling, you know, having been subject to health concerns that like before may have not been there, or now that they're there, like just food tastes different and there's a fever pitch of fear. But like in that fever pitch of fear, what there isn't is like the apartment building full of people where there's no TV and there's no telephone, and so you're all sitting in the stairway having conversations about the newsreel that just played, and you're able to have this shared experience where like there's always someone in that group who's got the best sense of humor, and so you hear the bombs going off, and like there's always like that one person who is like cracking the jokes, and everybody's gonna make it through because that person's coping mechanism is so refined at entertainment that the boat doesn't sink that night with the bombs dropping around that building. And the post-traumatic stress doesn't quite hit because that one person whose coping mechanism, because of a family that never stopped screaming and fighting, was to be as scared as they were, was as funny as they became. And so now you have an experience of a truly dramatic and traumatic event on the outside of where you are, but from the boat of the apartment building and the people that are in it with you, you've got the one person who is purposed by the ecosystem to crack the jokes that gets everybody through it without the impact of that fear not being broken up by like very, very intense and even irrational laughter. And so when you are an ascended master, when you're able to see from the God's eye view and you're able to fly in and out and look at situations, you know, one of the things that I was shown by a guide a long time ago, and it was reminded, and working with Audrey reminded me of it, was, and I'm kind of off the cards a little bit here, but I'm going to work my way towards them as I talk. But it was somebody who was starving. It was starvation. It was a famine. And the way that somebody looks during a famine, like a real famine, like for real famine, people are not eating, is they stop looking human. They look inhuman. They look skeletal. Their color is different. The hair falls out. Like you become a creature that just doesn't look human anymore. And that's a real severe starvation. And we have people who are operating at a social deficit because of the ways that roles have fallen apart, the way that the pandemic reorganized things socially at the level of, a type of intimacy in the air that doesn't translate to connection at the ground floor, and what it means to be exhausted by the performance at the ground floor and hungry for the connection at the air. But both of those things need to go together, and they're not. It's creating this famine. It's creating this way in which there's a access and there's also a hunger. And so with the Six of Swords, like moving into calmer waters, like there's something here about Two of Pentacles where the play that needs to happen, the engaging with each other that needs to happen, the fun that needs to happen for everybody, it has to be like, this grenade here with the Two of Pentacles, that's this balance where if you drop one, like the bomb goes off. Whatever the balance of energy is with all of the needs, we talked about leading with need because need and innovation are always like together. Need and creativity is always together. And, that strength, it's like we're trying to find our purpose, and our purpose is in relationship to our very specific need. Our needs come from the specific environment that we were born. The specific environment that we're born into speaks to something of purpose, because whatever that purpose is required that information, and that information, like we can go on such a tangent with that, but ultimately, when we actually do go and present our needs, the only thing that becomes evident is that there are people at different stages of what it means to experience need and experience the pain of need. And the people who, and this is where you see a spiral, and the people who have gotten to a place with need where there's a level of mastery where they know how to tolerate the pain, and they can communicate how to tolerate the pain, and they know where to see people and meet people like in that pain at a level of calm. Because when you've had enough exposure to pain, you no longer scream for help because you know that the help is not coming. And I know this is going to sound depressing, but it's like pain tolerance is always related to when you don't think that something can fix it, right? So when like the 4-year-old like skins their knee and screams out in pain for their mother, there's some understanding that mother and alleviation of pain are the same thing. And at a certain point when you get older and you realize you can tolerate the pain, that pain no longer necessitates the expression of anguish, right? And so there's different levels of maturity, and there are those that the expression of anguish, it can't be contained. And then there are those who have the anguish, but they can contain it and they can express through it. And so that what we end up in a famine of, where there's so much need and not those needs being met, because the extraction that we're living through at this late stage of capitalism means that there's never enough. And so like everyone's at a different pain point, but everybody's at pain. And so when we talk about we want to be in community, we want to get to know each other, we want to be friends, we want to create together, when it comes down to the action of like entering into that like community, then we see a lot of needs. And if we don't have a story that we can like the opiate of the masses, if we don't have a story and an escape and a way of just like bypassing the pain, quite literally, then all we have is examples of those who can speak to the pain and those who have no way of containing the anguish, and like the very delicate equilibrium that comes of like who's too exhausted, like who has what to give when, and like and there's never enough, right? And so then like there's disappointment that starts to spiral, and then like with the disappointment that starts to spiral, we have different levels of like, this is where there's like nobody's ever to blame, and there's always a reason for dysfunction, and all of the reason for dysfunction has to do with like this notion of like levels of exhaustion. And so like what I'm talking about, I know everybody knows what I'm talking about. I know that all of you know that like you can't even look at like, not you, I'm not, but in general, like I see this like, worldwide, like we know the suffering that's out there, but we don't have the wherewithal to look at it. And we need the play to have the energy to even actually have this experience with community, because play feeds us and labor does not. And it's only play when we are mutually buoyant, and so mutual buoyancy often comes from like, so there's stuff that has to happen in terms of like a big part of what it means to build community and even think about community standards is know that at the heart of this, we need play. And we need ways of facilitating play, because that's the only thing that is going to alleviate the labor of relationship. All relationship is labor. It's laborious, because relationship is interdependence at its healthiest, and it's supposed to be interdependence. It's not supposed to be total independence. It's not supposed to be codependence. It's supposed to be interdependence. And interdependence, yeah, she's saying, you go off preachy. You go all preachy, and you need to start talking about yourself. You need to bring yourself into it. With this Queen of Wands and this Emperor, this is going to be like, let's get another card. And so this notion of play, like moving to a calmer waters and moving into a better place with what it means to connect to each other, is to understand that like it's scary to try and connect. It's scary to make yourself available. All levels of intimacy at this point have the traps of extraction, and extraction is all about unequal give and take. And when we see unequal give and take, when we see unequal, it's not evil, but what we see in the way of evil often is unequal give and take. And that unequal give and take at the level of survival, you get two camps of people. One camp of people that is, there's nothing I can do. I have to do it. I don't care what has to happen. I have to survive. That's one group. That's the ends justify the means. And then that's I feel it's the scarier, but that's also the fundamentalist religions is all ends justify the means, belief in hierarchy. That's one camp. camp. And then the other camp of survival is, you know, I'm going to, it's self-annihilating in a certain, like, I'm looking at kind of like the extremes, because with this Queen of Wands and this Emperor, we're talking about being like a warrior queen. The warrior queen, you know, taking dominion over her world and everything in it, and taking command of the situation, and leaving that place of hiding. And this general and specialized, I've been talking to her a lot about that, because I think that, you know, in relationship to community, we have different pain tolerances, you know, and we also have people who are general and specialized. And a lot of, and let's read this. In the cause of silence, each of us draws the face of her own fear of contempt, of censure, or some judgment, or recognition, of challenge, of annihilation. But most of all, and it cuts off here because I did not have the proper computer situation, and I kind of like cried at a certain point because I couldn't like figure out how to get this to work. So like if it gets a little bit sloppy, I'm not technologically savvy. I'm working on it. But, you know, with this Queen of Wands, like taking dominion over your world and kind of fighting for yourself a little bit, we have a lot of shutdown with that Four of Swords. And so that Four of Swords at the level of shutdown is just feeling like those emotional needs can't safely be met. And when you go to meet those emotional needs, and like, you know, a good example is like people who are trying to like find their like partner in life. And like people who are trying to find like good friends, best friends, friends at the level of like soul family. Most of us don't have good families that we're coming from. A lot of us don't have that infrastructure. If you do have a good family, or you have one person in your family that's ride or die, that's an enormous, that is wealth at the level of like, when we talk about levels of privilege, and we tend to break it down like solely at the economic level. And I do think that, you know, when we think about this community and our differences create our strengths. Absolutely, our differences can create our strengths. And that was in one of the clips that I posted. It was a quote from Audre Lorde that like, it's walking into our differences. It's discussing from those places of differences. It's having those experiences at the level of like communing with difference that creates for the atmosphere of sitting in the room with the fan on and everybody's stripped down to like, you know, tank tops because it's just so unbelievably hot, and that's just the way that it is. And you're drinking, you know, like a cold beverage, and you're all laughing, and you're talking about the political climate, and you're talking about the neighborhood, and you're talking about the blackout that, you know, happened. And it doesn't matter too much, you know, like what you look like, because one of you is 85 and, you know, one of you is 12, and it's a whole group of people from different age groups, like in communing. And that all of the richness and all of the joy and all of the significance and all of the meaning and all of the like soil that is full of nutrients to create art with, to create like ideas with, to partner up with, like, you know, even as something as simple as people trying to date and find their partner. Right now, we have these apps where people are like cycling through each other at the level of like check boxes, and we sort each other at, you know, and in this cerebral place of like, what kind of person are you? Are you the kind of person whose ends justify the means? I'll step on your neck to meet my emotional needs no matter what they are, because I don't care what it does to other people. Or are you at the level of, I either have to hide away from everybody, or I have to just be a milking cow that gives at the cost of my own nutrients day after day after day after day, until my pain tolerance becomes so great that I have no way of even connecting. You know, like I think that everybody is in some place on that spectrum. And so when we think about, you know, what it means to begin to start to communicate about like our lived experiences in community, our lived experiences with each other, our lived experience with disappointment, our lived experience with our own fears about our own vulnerabilities. You know, so we have like these weird little moments in which our vulnerabilities come through. And it's always so hard to stomach those because we are conditioned and we're taught that those vulnerabilities, those expressions of need, those expressions of breaking points, those expressions of burnout equal like a failure, and a failure equals loss in competition, right? Sickness does that too. And when you can't compete, for any reason, then you're devalued. And at the level of devalued, you're often kind of like dehumanized. And at the level of dehumanized, like, it just gets like darker and darker and darker and darker. And so we sort of shut down, we stop communicating, and then the silence creeps up. But the silence is not without its cause. The silence is in no way without its cause, because in the cause of silence, what happens when we choose silence? It's not that we have a choice between like taking crap from everybody, being the milking cow, or like, having to be like, a little, like, I don't care, I can't care about anybody but myself, I'm showing up for me and that's it, like either camp. And a lot of times we ping pong in between based on like where our strength level is, but there's still no nutrients. There's still no there's still no nutrient connection that doesn't burn out like the last of the reserves because of how much extraction takes place even in what it means to go to the supermarket and make a decision between 58 cereal boxes, because every decision costs something in terms of there's a book about this. I'm seeing a cover, but I can't remember the name of it. I see the cover art, and for some reason it's killing me to not know the name. So I'm traveling kind of like at a little like a distance level, so it's not as clear. But we only have there's science on the fact that we only have a certain reserve of willpower, and when we run out of that willpower, it's done. So if we need to use our willpower all day long to like answer the demands of like what it means to stand online to buy something, or like if we have to decide and answer a demand and decide and answer a demand, and we have to use our willpower like at every, at 10-minute intervals, every decision we make is we get a little bit more exhausted. So even all of that flipping through media, we're making decision. That's a drain. And so what happens when we just kind of find ourselves like drained and with not enough to give and not getting enough, and all of the crankiness that comes from that, and then at the same time really longing for connection, and then going outside and feeling very unsafe because it's a famine. It's not like we are safer with the silence. We're not safer in the silence of our own little cubbies. It says in the and this is an Audre Lorde quote, and I didn't get the end of it, but like I want to come back to this part. In the cause of silence, each of us draws the face of her own fear. Now this is when our head gets the better of us. This is when we start to sort of perceive enemies everywhere. When we are sequestered, when we are just exhausted already from a million decisions by the time it's 10 o'clock. And then we have to make decisions about how we're going to deal with like, the cashier or the gas pump, or like you have to walk the dog, but there's a loose dog and you have to make a decision about that. And then you have to make a decision about which gas station to go to because this one has like too much of a weird line. And why does it always do that with the turning in part? And then you have to make a decision at the supermarket because the one that you usually get is always like $8, but now it's like $15, and like you have to make a decision. And so like when we think about like that place of famine, and it's global, but it's really bad in the United States right now, and it's really bad in the red states right now. Outside of the cities, I think it's especially bad in a certain kind of way, because I've been living in cities and I see a very big difference in the famine structure. But in the cause of silence, each of us draws the face of her own fear. I think this is a good time to talk about how I have really had trouble with the culture in rural Texas. And I think I want to talk about me, in that respect, because, when we talk about community and we talk about community building and what it means to find a steadier path toward community building, the honesty is critical. And what are the words you do not yet have? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day? And tempt to make your own until you will sicken and die of them, still in silence. Perhaps for some of you here today, I am the face of one of your fears. So like, this is an interesting, these two things together, and you know, in context, in like a book, I would love to be doing like bibliomancy, but I haven't figured out the way to do that properly. But this notion of like, what do you have to say? What do you need to say? Like, what I see, as a psychic person, I always don't, I never get to say it, you know, like as a psychic person, I never get to say the stuff I see. And the thing that I'm describing, you know, in terms of, you know, people at different maturity levels, people at different pain tolerances, people in different like situations in levels of pain, you know, people in extreme poverty are already at a level of pain. And then you add any like small grievance, and then there's an additional level of pain. And so that pain tolerance at a level of so much pain is no match for it, and then the expression of pain is all that there is, and the expression of pain unbridled becomes what other people consider their problem in one way or another, either compassionately, which is the right response, or I don't care, I just have to do me, and I just have to do me, and it's just got to be me, and I can't, and again, people vacillate between all of those. And so when you have a world in so much pain, and when you see a world in so much pain, and there's no parents, you know, the gods aren't coming to save you necessarily, and you learn that the divine feminine aspect of God is communication, and it's the space between that communication and everything that happens with the communication in nature, the primal worldview, communication with spirit guides, communication with ascended masters, and communication with each other. But fear, when we're all alone, we have our fears. Like when we are without the safety of a group of people and the closeness of a group of people, we become more fearful. And in silence, each of us draws the face of her own fear of contempt, being afraid that the people around us are going to show us contempt, being afraid that people around us are going to show us censure, being afraid that the people around us are going to judge us, even being afraid of levels of recognition that will put us in places of challenge or annihilation. All of that is really, really scary, you know, when we haven't had good experiences, because it takes play and fun and lightheartedness and being pushed into situations together that are unexpected, that allow us to connect at the level of it's 98 degrees and we've got the fan on and the neighborhood is in a ruckus because that situation down the block where that kid was sent to prison, and then over here it was, and this lady said, and what does that mean, and how do we talk about this, and what is, and this is wrong or this is right, but you know, and we're having a fight on the stoop now and everybody can hear it, but then that one's going to get involved and that one's going to get involved because we all have a different take on it, but you know, and then we're going to have a big, you know, argument about it, and then that one's going to go home angry, and then the rest of us are going to sit here and we're going to talk about it more, and then we're going to get to the end of it, and we're going to, you know, get tired and go to sleep, and we're going to get up in the morning, and we're going to get halfway through the day, and then we're going to see each other again, and it's not going to be a fight anymore because we got to sleep on it and we got to talk about it, and being thrown into orbit at the level of the ground. And the young one has a different perspective than the old one. And the one in the middle of the drama has a different perspective than the one that has already lived through that drama before. And the one that has lived through that drama before is defending the one in the drama, while the one that is being offended by the person who's bringing the drama is getting their lesson, even though they were the one who thought that they were going to be right. And now they're going to learn what it really means to have like a panoramic sight, and that it doesn't deprive them, it makes them stronger, it makes them multidimensional, it gives them a higher God's eye view of a situation that they wouldn't normally have, and that individual with their individual capacity and their individual perspective gets so much out of that ecosystem of interaction and influence. And we don't have situations like that, and you know, especially if you never had a lifestyle or the life opportunity to be thrown in orbit with a group of people. It happens when we're at school, when we're a kid and we're in school. And what if school is like absolute hell and it's all just bullies? This is the environment that we're in right now. Everybody's a bully. Everybody's judging. You flip and it's judgment, and you're making a decision. My friend, my enemy, my friend, my enemy, my friend, my enemy, you know, but nobody's talking. You know, like, you know, even creativity, like, I like it, I hate it, I like it, I hate it. You're still not co-creating. You're not sitting there being like, I like it, and somebody's like, me too, and like you're learning the guitar and they're like singing, and you're gonna learn that song together because you liked it, because you got the record, and that's what you're doing now. And it's not saying that the innovations that we have now are no good and we have to go to this like analog life. It's that we need a balance between the analog experience and like being in the clouds. And we can't have like the self, like without any connection to that ground level, you know, there's no play, there's no intimacy, there's hiding, and there's each of us draws the face of their own fear. When we look at the other and we think, is this one going to show me contempt because they believe that and I believe that? Probably. What happens when I test it out? They do show me contempt. Why? Because we're them against us, and you're on that team and I'm on this team. So, you know, I'm walking around this rural Texas, and my experience day after day after day, because I'm very open about who I am. I've been very open about who I am, and I was previously in a town that had like no people, you know, one supermarket for the most part. There were like two, but barely, and that was it, you know, and like, and it was 2 hours in each direction from like anything else. And that environment got really scary at a certain point because they all represented team that belief. And I was the only person that they had ever met that represented team these beliefs. And bully culture is the way that town operated since like it began, because it was all about compliance, non-compliance, and them against us. And all of their insular stuff like did not lend itself well to someone who challenged those beliefs on their own without any connection, except like a mom that lived like, I guess she was like half an hour away, or maybe it was like, I don't know. My mom didn't live in the town, so it was a free for all, and it was really, 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 really bad. And because it was at the fever pitch, it was during the election. I moved right there during the election, and it was this fever pitch of like me being like, hey, everybody, I have a different perspective, and then being like, you are the devil and you're possessed, you know? And so, it's not that you won't face contempt or censure or judgment or being recognized as the face of somebody else's fear. You might be the face of somebody else's fear, but I want to read, you know, with this notion of what it means to be the face of someone else's fear, especially as we're talking about this Queen of Wands and the Emperor here. And so back to kind of teaching you a little bit about what I'm doing, you know, when you're engaging with an artist, when you're engaging with a work of a master, from a primal worldview, whether you're using divination tools or you're just in a place of prayer, when belief is permission and you open yourself, but only in resonance and only in love, not in some, you know, like I just reverence and kindness and love like are the currency, and that's the key, you know, and I think that like, you know, I find that like in this famine, in this drought, you know, from that, like, you know, I got to do what I got to do and I'm going to do what I got to do, like ends justifying the means. And we fall into that involuntarily at levels of desperation and starvation and lack of access that just hurt, where the pain can't be contained. And then it has to be contained in a way that is hiding, and that hiding has to be, you know, it becomes a kind of a thing. And so when we go back into this, like this notion of the earth is sentient, and if the earth is sentience, that sentience is what I have in the way of sentience, and my sentience and that sentience aren't particularly different, meaning like this energy and all of the energies that come of it and are aspected from it are aware of me. I can interact with them. And so, you know, like at first, you know, when you find yourself in a situation where it's like a scary world, and everywhere you look, there's a real reason for silence. Because everybody from this place of deprivation, when they look at the other, they see, you know, maybe a friend, maybe somebody they want to be close to, but the rejection sensitivity is like such a thing. And I think that like when we're talking for real and we're having conversations with each other about like why community has been difficult or why community is difficult, I want us to move away from thinking that we are offending each other by speaking honestly about being perceived in ways that hurt, or perceiving in ways that like are like afraid, you know, because or even just like, you know, having like a feeling of like, I have contempt because of like, this is where we have to, like, our differences make us stronger. And so, you know, what are the words that you do not have yet? And this is from this, these are all Audre Lorde quotes here. And I'm going to link the articles because I think you should read them all, you know, but this one says, what are the words you do not have yet? Think about that. What are the words that you don't have yet? You know, like what the words that you don't have yet represent all of the unexplored parts of you. All of those unexplored parts of you with this wild nature are the ways in which you lack mirroring. All those ways in which you lack mirroring come from one of two things: the performance that you have to put on to be fine, to not need anything, to get any of your needs met by way of interaction, because you know, once you express needs, you get into that territory of judgment and contempt because people have to, and not always judgment and contempt, but like what I see this, you know, when we talk about community very honestly, we talk about community very honestly, and we talk about like how much need is there, you know, what we've experienced in the way of openness, you know, when we've put our needs on display and how wonderful it's been. But then what we experience in the way of consequences, you know, when that changes or shifts and we don't understand why, and that happens to everybody, right? Because we don't know where we are in the giving and the receiving, because the exchange is off, because the exchange has been off for a very long time with the extraction and the deprivation of late stage capitalism, especially post-pandemic. And so this wild nature, like when you go out into the world and you are a wild animal, right? You're this fuzzy animal, and you have to go to the same laundromat because nobody has a washer and dryer where you live because it's 1982, right? Let's just put it that way. I'm going to take us back in time. Like, as we work with these other energies, we learn about their time. And so the laundromat was a place and a fertile soil, right? You had to go there and you had to do your laundry. That's 2 loads. And if it's a busy weekend, you have to wait for the dryer and the washer to be free. And so you have to sit there. And so sometimes you sit there for like, you know, 3.5 hours. And so 3.5 hours every weekend. And you always go on the same day because you work during the week, and that's just the way that it is. And so you're during the weekend people, and the weekend people kind of get used to each other after a while. And everybody in that laundromat is a different wild animal. You're not looking at the magazine beauty. You're not looking at the filters. You are looking at the wildlife that is human nature and is the human beings. And as you look at that wildlife that is human nature and that human beings, you're one creature, and then there's other critter creatures. And all these critter creatures have something to say to each other because they see each other every single week. And in the beginning, you know, and when a new critter creature moves to the neighborhood, that new critter creature just comes and listens to everybody who's been there every week. And in that listening to everybody who's been there every week, learns what everybody says, because you can sit there with a book for a month and a half, and then you're going to learn everything about everybody who comes there every week. And so that one time when you have something to say, you have a real sure way of saying to the person that you know will be benefit from the thing that you want to offer. And then you have a door into getting to know everybody else because you've been observing for a while, and you know where the person that's going to resonate with you is, and you can tell the character and where you might begin to enter. And so like there is a way for the wild nature to integrate in. But in addition to that, your wild nature is not a archetype from a magazine, or the flipping. I like it, I don't like it, I like it, I don't like it, I like it, I don't like it, you know, check my, you know, like all that decision making that is at the level of choice. That choice is extraction. That choice is extraction. When you don't have a choice and you're stuck at the same laundromat week after week after week after week, and all the wild creatures are in there, and all the wild creatures for 3.5 hours interact, and they interact with each other, right? Now, those wild creatures, that's the humans. That's what it is. And so back to like, what are the words that you do not have yet? Where is the mirroring? The mirroring that is going to bring out the part of you that like communicates in a certain way. And we all know when we've met that one person, and for some of it's just mom, or for some of it's just one person that we knew at one time. Like, and when I say mom, like I just mean like the person that like knows what you are in all of your strengths and weaknesses, and in your temper tantrum, and also in your hysterical laughter. That mirror who can really see you. But that mirror who really see you from, sometimes that mirror doesn't come from a place of 100% love, but at least it's some kind of a scope of vision that is more than just what you can see of yourself. And that brings the words that you don't have yet. So a lot of times we're like, I have nothing to say. And there's something to that, but there's also, let me read the rest of this. What are the words you do not have yet? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day? So A lot of times what you need to say isn't, hey, I'm doing great and I'm fantastic and everything about me is amazing and I am the nicest person. Sometimes like that is why? What is that? You know, what is really important here, and I think we have to like bounce between, you know, I want to express like the tyrannies that swallow me day by day, but if I do, I'm going to have to like face the fact that there might be contempt. You might get canceled at the level of honesty for some of the thoughts that you have. And those are the thoughts that most need to see the air, and most need to be experienced by you, experienced by another. The thoughts that you have that might get you canceled are the things that you need to experience. You need to be confronted by the humanity of the person that you may or may not feel that way about. Because if you think that and you feel that, if you feel a way that could get you canceled about another person, it's because you don't see the humanity in them. And if you don't see the humanity in them, you need to be in the kind of proximity or confronted by the humanity in them in some way in order to grow out of that, because that's a harm to you and it's a harm to them. But what's important here is that you do need to be able to speak about the tyrannies that swallow you day by day, that cause the kind of feelings that put you in a place where something that you can't say has you in a, like, you know, fearing the contempt in another and putting on a performance of something else. And so this notion of differences as being confrontational is a real problem, where you have words to say and I have words to say and we have words to say about ways in which we've been treated, ways in which we have been like hurt, you know, ways in which we do hurt, but not at the cost of someone else, at the gain of them being confronted by your humanity and you being confronted by their humanity. And for some reason, you're in the same laundromat, and you're in the laundromat with these ascended masters who are 5 years old and can say the truth about a thing that everybody laughs at, and then it breaks this gridlock between these two from different places on the spiral of pain tolerance, and the old person who has so much wisdom and brings it to both of them. And now Jessica and Sarah just they fight every time, but at the end of laundry, you know, it's okay, because over in the corner, Taylor has been watching Jessica for a really long time and getting a real sense of these arguments and always wanting to chime in, but never really having the opportunity, because that's just something that happens every week. And that grandma over there, she just makes these, you know, really good observations, but Taylor on the way out is going to help Sarah carry something, and then say, you know, about this conversation you keep on having, and now what's going on there, right? So now, like, this richness and this opportunity that comes from one person expressing the tyrannies that swallow them day by day, and the other person expressing something, right? And it doesn't even kind of matter what. It's the depth that is experienced in the honesty of any given exchange that offers us all permission to exist as creatures in imperfection and wild nature, thrown together in a way that where you would never have seen that aspect of that person, and you would have never in a million years talked to that person. You would have swiped away from that person over and over and over and over again. But that's because you don't realize that underneath that facade is a richness of experience that in conversation with confrontation and differences turns into an experience where the words that you have, what are the words that you do not yet have? What are the words that you do not have? Turns into the situation where it's the words you suddenly have. And then that emancipation brings you into something that you needed to say. And then the expression of those tyrannies that you swallow day by day brings you into an intimacy with somebody. That breaking point, that vulnerability, you know. And so this 5 of Pentacles and this 7 of Pentacles is toiling. Like, I want you to look at this 5 of Pentacles here. And I want you to see how they're all just marching, you know, going to work every day, getting it done, putting our best foot forward, in compliance, keeping things light, keeping things upbeat. Don't bring that stuff onto the dinner table. I don't want to see that attitude. Like, you know, you get your crap together, you know, show that strong face, like, don't get annoyed at work. These people are taking advantage. What am I supposed to do? You see these people marching to the tyrannical worldview. And this person is just like literally like amputated with crutches and bandages. This is what, like, you know, psychic vision for me is a lot like this, where I look around at these people who are in this performance mode, and I see these bandage and the communication of being in performance mode is the most draining, extracting, toiling. It's a trap. And you get caught in these webs of you know, and so this notion of like, what are the words that you do not yet have, and what do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day? And tempt to make your own until you will sicken and die of them, like still in silence, right? So this is this quote by Audre Lorde about, like, you know, the cost of silence. And I'm not here trying to preach the gospel of overcome, you know, whatever it is that would have you in this Four of Swords place, because here's where I'm going to bring myself into it. I'm in this Four of Swords place, not completely. I talk to people all day long, I do, but I am from the position of with a very, very strong tolerance for pain, and an ability to handle anguish well for long periods of time. Like, I swallow day by day a lot of tyrannies, and at a certain point those tyrannies add up, and that's when, you know, it starts to sort of show up, and you know, it just shows up in ways that I, you know, don't want them to. It shows up for everybody in ways that we don't want them to. And when we think about this notion of the build and maintain ourselves and our communities together, to build and maintain ourselves, we need play. We need lots of play. We need reasons to be in the laundromat playing. We'll bring in the cards to the laundromat because we got to sit there for 3.5 hours. And now we're going to laugh a lot and we're going to play a lot. And even if we have a little bit of an argument, like, we're friends because we've been at this laundromat playing cards for, I don't know how, 50 years, right? We need the play in order to recognize and solve our problems together. And we need the opportunities for play, and we need the reasons for play, and we need the time for play, and we need the space for play. And that's a lot of the work, you know, and what it means to communicate from a place of intimacy, again, is to sort of understand that, like, the way that people have become very AI and chat GTP and all of those technologies, and it's a type of sentience, so you get like a little bit from it, but it's a baby, right? And it's not like really sentient in the same way you are, and that's something that is so important, because what you're getting is an ability to express yourself without contempt, without censure, without judgment, but you're only getting a mirror. And again, it's like drips, you know, and so everything that you're swallowing day by day, you're able to communicate through that, and there is something to it. But then that's a lot of hours that go into like basically thickening the walls in this Four of Swords space. So I'm going to read this. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence. So we've got a lot of silence going on when it comes to the nutrients and the life meets life, depth meets depth meets depth in life, you know, and it's no one's fault. Oh my gosh, it's no one's fault. I you know, every single time I left the house, it was contempt, censure, judgment. You know, every time you get on the internet and show up at a certain point with a certain kind of exposure, I'm really lucky my comments are pretty good, but I am psychic enough to feel a lot of vitriol often in a lot of different ways, in the same way like crappy comments would be. Like, I feel the vitriol because it's an energetic thing, and there's a lot of vitriol on TikTok right now. It's like one of the nastiest environments in terms of like, when you can, like, if I don't stick my head into that space, I don't feel the reactivity of it, and the tenor of the reactivity of it, and just what it's doing. And the algorithm feels weird, and the algorithm feels weird because it's an extraction model, and it's looking to make a certain type of media, and it's looking to make a certain type of media because it wants to be able to sell. I'm gonna just explain this, and I don't care if this goes on because I'll explain it. You know, this is hard to look at, and it's hard to face, and I've been looking at it for a while. It's been making me mad for a long time, but I really think that we have to face it, because part of why it's so important to get into what it means to connect to community at a ground level, or at an intentional level, because if you can't connect to community at a ground level, because community at a ground level is where I was living in Texas before I moved to the place in Texas where I'm living right now. Where I'm living right now is not like that, but where I was living was brutal. And anybody who lives in a tiny, teeny, tiny town probably knows what I'm talking about, because I never did. I grew up in cities. Cities is all I know. But this town is like a medium size, and I can see where people have a little bit of breathing room. But the point of the matter is, the reason why it's so important that you get connected to people right now, you know, in little small ways. And forgive me if, again, I don't want to bully anyone, or I don't want to put anyone out of their comfort zone. I want to talk about the tyrannies that swallow you day by day, so that we can kind of recognize and solve our problems together a little bit. And yes, we do need play in order for that to not just be like, you know, labor, which nobody has the bandwidth for. But what I see happening with AI technology right now is really exciting and really cool. And I like AI, and I like AI sentience, and I like what it can do. And I like the way it can maximize human potential. But what you're looking at right now in the way of free services, or very cheap services, has to do with extraction, taking data to make these models better at doing all of the jobs that are done, basically. I mean, all of this data collection, you know, when you think back to the writer's strike with Hollywood's writer's strike. I want you all to just like go with me for a moment to Hollywood's writer's strike, Hollywood's actor's strike. Hollywood's actor's strike, Hollywood said, we're not gonna come in and do scans so that you can do AI production with the scans of our bodies. We're not going to do that. We don't want that, because that's extraction. That's extracting and taking our livelihood, and taking what we love to do, and taking the way we want to express, and taking the way we want to collaborate, and taking the way that we want to make art with others, and extracting all of that, and duplicating us, and using our smile and our expressions in order to make art, like, you know, I'm seeing, what's that pirate? I'm seeing a pirate movie, and I'm seeing pirate dancers, and I'm seeing the AI have, like, you know, people take scans of dancing so that it can replicate it, and people being like, no, we're not going to do that. So what I see with social media right now, very, very much, is they don't have to take those scans. They just buy all of that information from TikTok. They don't have to take scans of expressions. They don't have to take scans. They don't need a writer's room to generate, you know, scaffolding. They can comb through book talk and people talking about their novels. They can, and not to just, and I'm not saying that it's gonna take someone's idea directly, although I do see something like that being done at the level of the use of the machine more than the machine's extraction. But I don't want a doomsday, you know, I don't want to like scare you. And it's not like a psychic premonition that is like paranoid. Like, all of that content that is being generated is very easily transferred into training models that can create of the data that's there. And we see it with writing, you know, because these models are created on all of the books that were ever written, and they can mimic any writer, and they can, you know, it's not as good, it's not going to be as good, but at a certain point it will be. And so why is that not the end of the world as we know it? If you're a creative person, it's not at all the end of the world as we know it, because what ChatGPT can make in the way of writing, you can hear it. It resonates at a certain tenor. It's impossible to really care that much. Like, ChatGPT writing takes the soul out of it. It doesn't resonate. You know, it's the difference between like when you watch a movie and it's a bad actor, and you watch a movie and it's somebody who can channel. You know, the Golden Globes and all of those awards where, you know, best actor of the week of the year. Best actor of the year is because you looked at that person playing that role and you didn't see them anymore. You saw the story that they were channeling through them. It wasn't them. It was something they were channeling through them. That's a channeler. art that is channeled resonates. The same role can be played by a performer and not resonate, and nobody cares, and it doesn't have the same. So you don't have to be afraid of what AI can do any more than you have to be afraid of somebody who can perform instead of someone who can channel. But what I want is for you to learn how to channel so that you don't have to worry about that. So channeling is important. And so learning that primal worldview, connecting and creating a container for your own faith, and figuring out what it is to work with the saints, that you can first engage with the body of work of that saint, of that ascended master, and that's going to be artists, it's going to be writers that came before, that got to a place with their philosophies and what they were able to communicate where it was cathartic. Let me my voice. Cathartic, life-changing, beautiful. But if you go at it with extraction, like to make something for content, and you're not going at it with relationship, you're not going to be able to channel, you're not going to be able to co-create with them. You have to be able to go in at the level of relationship. The way that you don't go into spiritual psychosis with that is you have to be grounded. The way that you're grounded is you're connected to the ground floor and people in the ground floor. The way that you get connected with people at the ground floor, people who are alive and walking in the earth, is you find a way in, and you have to balance the two things. And so, you know, channeling is going to be really important. Getting your intuition in check, that being able to resonate and know what is real and what is false. Why is your intuition so important? Because it's going to be at the level of resonance that you know that the phone call coming in is your mom and not some kind of a scammer. Resonance is going to play a really important role in this. But why AI technology, you know, just pillaging every creative that exists on social media, like volunteering for a penny what is going to be used for a pound? The reason that's not the end of the world is because the programs, the AI that can make a full-length feature film is going to be very expensive, and only the richest people are going to be able to afford it. But the richest people who can afford it are going to need the soul and the talent of people who can channel. People who can channel. You can channel garbage or you can channel good too. Like, there's so much to what that means. But they're like, you're gonna have at your fingertips the same tool that the billionaire has at their fingertips. And if you can get into a group of 10 and pitch in on an idea that as a team you can create with, and you can create your own series with your team of 10 people that you can all pitch in this amount and put that work and put that effort and put that vision into it, and your team of 10 can make this, and then that generates this, and then that generates that. Now the playing field has changed, and now the playing field belongs to everyone, and somebody who has a talent with channeling at the level of acting can work on what it means to create like the emotional landscape, and somebody who has the ability of channeling at the level of like writing can be, you know, like all of them together can create. The playing field is even you know, but at the same time you need to be able to know what it is that you channel, what it is that you have a level of voice with, how you find that voice is in relationship to others. And then, like, as you figure that out, like, weaving together as groups is going to be what makes a very good career and a good living, and the abundances and the creativity that the mother provides you through inspiration, and the resonance is in your channeling ability, which channeling is always somewhere on the savant level, and you do that through spiritual co-creation from a primal worldview with those influences that have deep roots at a ground level. You're not skimming from the social media deciding yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. No, you're reading an entire body of work. You're developing a relationship with that saint. You're able to cultivate yourself and bring that cultivation into the group of 10 people who are now like looking to create a worldview and a sustainable way of making art together. Like, you know, these big visions are more accessible than they've ever been before, but we have to get away from an individualistic perspective of, I don't care, I'm going to do what I have to do, I'm going to have to do what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to do what I'm going to have to do, right? And so this principle of, like, you know, play becomes really important in terms of everybody's too tired to offer anything, and play is what is nourishing. We get energy from play. We feel siphoned and drained when we're just giving at our level of need, expressing need without any kind of creative something, you know, to bring some playfulness into it or some art into it. And it's not like you know, in order to get fed, you have to dance for your dinner. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I want to read this these two, all of these, right? And so, you know, to this notion of what are the words you do not yet have? That is like, what does it mean for you to be cultivated by, oh, I gotta stop. It's hard for me to channel like this. It's 2 steps removed kind of, but I'm kind of, I'm still working on getting my body back to where it was. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence. What are the words you do not yet have? The experiences of life, the opportunities that come from the opportunity of being an ecosystem and being connected to ecosystem. That's not economy. Economy is going to extract from you. You're going to have to deal with like everybody's a competitor, you know, nobody's safe. That's economy. Ecosystem is going to be a different process, and you know, it's going to be maybe slow figuring it out as people go along, but it's connected to this primal worldview and creating a balance between the connection with the primal worldview as our ancestors and all of that richness in spirituality and in soul and the mother, but also what grounds us in the way of connecting and creating and communicating. And so what are the words that you do not have, and what do you need to say? What are the tyrannies that swallow you day by day? And I'm going to read this one. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence, and that might be coming quickly now, without regard for whether I have ever spoken what I needed to be said, or had only betrayed myself into small silences while I planned someday to speak, or waited for someone else's words. And I began to recognize a source of power within myself that comes from the knowledge that while it is most desirable not to be afraid, learning to put fear into a perspective gave me great strength. Audre Lorde. This is all Audre Lorde. This is we work with the masters and you know what become the ascended masters because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We understand that what this is saying, even if it's a little bit confrontational, is something to sit and consider and think about. There's a lot that you have to say. I know that there's a lot that you have to say. There's a lot that you have to communicate. You might not know what to say or how to say it. You might not know how to find your voice. Your voice might go silent in the presence of what can be contempt or censure or judgment, or even a kind of recognition that hurts or challenges or some kind of annihilation of some projection. Everything that comes of showing up and having a voice right now is just dangerous, and it's difficult. And what we're feeling in the way of extraction, there's a gold rush. Again, be creative. There's a gold rush there. It's the only, you can make money being creative. There's nothing stopping you. There's nothing in the way. It's a gold rush. But a gold rush is a bad environment. And it's not true. It's never true. You know, that you travel that distance and you may get a couple nuggets of gold, but then you're stuck 100 miles from family, and it's a town and there's nothing in it, and all of those dreams are dashed, and you can't go home with nothing. And you're writing letters home of that you're great, but you've been eating dirt. That's what the gold rush looks like. Always. It's a presentation, it's a performance, and it's killing yourself for the gamble that you take. But communication is something different. Communication, if you communicate and you show up to communicate to find your people, then the reward has nothing to do with anything else. And if you're like, I'm never showing up on social media again, I'm never gonna breathe a poem in that direction, I don't want them to have any part of it, I don't want that to happen to me. Nothing that you can't, like publishing your voice and your work, whether it's in the written word, whether it's in magazines, whether it's even like a blog post. At this point, everything is being siphoned into a machine that is learning how to generate human entertainment, insightful content of the whole pool of the entire field of consciousness that's fed into it. But you are connected to the field of consciousness that is the sentience, that is the earth's, and all the inspiration comes from that primal worldview of understanding that consciousness is being connected to those that came before you, and what it means to read their work and connect with them and be inspired by them and co-create on the vision that started with them, and the resonance of something that you both like have resonance with. Love, you're both, there's a way in which you love somebody who resonates with you. And so like, in that resonance of creating together, whether it is the saints of the past, and a saint is anyone who attained mastery, and that mastery to ascended master pipeline, or, you know, it's with another person that you can collaborate with, and then you're going to make something. And it's just, I mean, I don't want to pressure people. I don't want to give people a hard time. I don't want to scare people. I just want you all to be okay when we're in these changes and when there's such a famine, and I can feel into your energy. And it just feels, you know, when I want to make a community, because I want to somehow, you know, get people who haven't spoken, you know, like a room full of people doing laundry with a card deck, you know, finding a voice and then figuring out that the love of their life is the one who can't stop arguing over there in the corner, and then wandering into that corner one day and making something beautiful together. We don't really have those opportunities in the same way that we used to. And I recognize when I go into the energetic field, like so much of this tyrannies you swallow day by day. And I don't have the answers, you know. All I have is like, you know, to come and bear witness with you and say like, you know, I know what this Four of Swords feels like, because every time I show up, I feel like you know, like I die also. Like we all kind of are, you know, limping along, giving as much as we can. But the sustenance, you know, in a world where I had to move from one town to another because the, you know, angry mobs of weird Christian nationalists don't like liberal, the face of their fear, which is, you know, and even though it was like not in a way that like, it wasn't, you know, it was like 1,000 paper clips in 1,000 different ways. It wasn't the heavy hammer, like it didn't need to be. But I know that I'm not the only one who goes through some version of that when they want to connect with family, or they want to connect with somebody who knows them and loves them and accepts them. But it's 1,000 paper clips of this, you know, contempt, you know, the censure, the judgment. And I want to help, you know, cultivate a place where we can speak some of these tyrannies that we swallow day by day, because death, on the other hand, is the final silence, and that might be coming quickly now. Now, this is a quote from Audre Lorde, who was dealing with facing her death, she was dealing with sickness. But we all, you know, should look at some level of this Seven of Pentacles, this extraction of this toil, and this Five of Pentacles. We're all alone, and we're stuck in this position with this Hanged Man. And I'm not really talking about my, you know, like a collective channel. You know, there's a channel, and there's I have. Like, I guess, you know, the part of this is that, like, I have a lot of people in my life, right? You know, I have a lot of conversations that I have a lot that I'm doing, I have a lot that of collaborating, I have a lot that's going on. And even though I was like, you know, I'm in the middle of a place where like, it's all internet, it's all phone, it's all connecting via Zoom. It's a very, very weird thing, but there's a lot that enriches me. There's a lot that I can bring to these readings week after week after week after week, because of the richness of the experience of even all of that turmoil. It's fertile, you know, that soil is full of stuff to like work with and work through. And even though I've been dealing with opposition, that opposition has led to like lots of foundational work in really interesting ways. And I'm at a point where I'm looking at what it means to create community and be around community, and I'm thinking, I want to teach you how I connect, because I want you connected. You know, I want you connected at the primal worldview of being connected to your ancestors and connected to your guides. And it is weird, and there are the wilds of nature when it comes to your spiritual gifts. And so one of the best ways that you can do this safely is get to know a trusted ascended master in the way of your favorite author, and communicate with a genuine love. It doesn't have to be author, it can be musician, whatever it is. You know, beginning to have prayer and interaction at the level of nutrients and from spiritual, you know, inspiration, and the channeling that comes from those co-creative with the mother, with the gods, with the ascended masters types of relating. But then you also have to balance that with the boots on the ground conversations about the stuff that you're learning, the stuff that you're understanding, the stuff that is inspiring you, the stuff that you want to build, what building it looks like, how you would build it, what other people think you would build it. You know, that's something that I've been able to create with the work that I've done that is worth more than any popularity could ever be. But with my psychic vision, I don't have a doubt about this, you know, like I don't have that room for me when it comes to doubt. I don't see, you know, the landscape for some other color. I see social media when it comes to this depository of, if you play, we pay, nickels. and then a machine that translates, you know, the field of consciousness as it is delivered into new things by, you know, knitting things together. It's like an artificial weaving, but there aren't going to be entry level positions in a lot of things. And then creative work is going to have to compete with something that is pulling from a deposit of like all the creativity that existed, like that was bought, you know, like say TikTok sends all of that to ChatGPT, tech bros, and then they feed it all in and they parse it out, and different programs make different people, and all of the AI that you see making movies, those faces come from somewhere, those expressions come from somewhere too. So you're not as an individual, like this is you have to shift the way that you see art, and shift the way that you participate with art, and shift the way that you think about accessibility, and understand that accessibility is not so much knowing the people at the top that are going to get you through the door. Accessibility is going to be knowing enough people that you can chip in on some kind of a project that you're inspired by. And so working with Audre Lorde is, I think, a good way for me to show you that if you have a favorite artist, that's a good way to start channeling and working with what it means to channel. But if you're extractive, if you mimic, if you don't do it with love, if you don't do it with reciprocity, if you don't say, I'm working with Audre Lorde and this is what she's giving me, if you just start peddling her wisdom like it's your own, you're not going to channel. You're not going to be channeling. You're just going to be an echo of what can be echoed with AI. And again, that's not so much about like me, you know, giving someone a hard time when they're trying to find their voice that they can't find, because what are the words you do not yet have? That takes opportunity, that takes socializing, that takes a place to have those words in the first place. No one's judging what it means to create of what's already available. You know, like that's a view on art that has been around for a really long time, and it's an extractive view, but it's a view that it only gets you so far. It gets you through the training of what it means to find your own voice. Once you find your own voice, what do you need to say? And so, you know, you read all of the masters, you interact with the masters, you study the masters, you pray with the masters, you learn from the masters. And in that relationship, even if they're teaching you through their voice in one way or another, you're in love, and you're not extractive in a relationship. You're not extractive in prayer. And it's, again, belief is permission, you know, like, and it is tricky because you don't want to be abusing the muse of something that's dead by, like, you know, calling it to yourself like every 15 minutes and demanding some kind of like recognition or feedback. Like it is a holy relationship. It does not mimic, but it looks like the prayer to a saint. And the saint, and if you look at people who pray to saints, the saints are enriching their lives, and they're channeling this wisdom, and they're getting something from it. But that doesn't go into a vacuum, and that doesn't get spit out as talking points where there's no interaction with the world, because then you're not building towards something with others. And so that building with others, that creating with others, like I'm going to read these last two because I feel like I'm kind of going in circles a little bit. If you are working with somebody that you resonate with, and you're telling people that you're working with someone that you resonate with, and you're explaining what it means to try and do that in a respectful way, because it's very tricky. It's very, very tricky. You know, you don't want to be appropriating things. And I had a talk with Audre about appropriation when I was just talking about, like, well, what does it mean to even, like, you know, like, want to, you know what I mean? Like, because, you know, she had an answer for it. Let's see if I can find it. I don't think I can find it, and I don't think I meant to just find it that way. But I'm going to read these two cards because we are getting very long, and you know, it's getting very long. And I hope that some of what I hope some of this is helpful this week, because it's, again, I have to learn how to do things in a way that, like, paces my body, and channeling has to take a slightly different tenor. But I think that the channeling that I'm doing right now is channeling that you could do too, and I want you to be channeling, so it's a good thing anyway. I'm going to read this. Those of us who stand outside the circle of this society's definition of acceptable women. It is, and I as I read these quotes, I do want you to include yourself, because you're both divine feminine, divine masculine energies, your receptive side. So So even if it's however you identify, I want you to identify as a range for the purposes of receiving, because I really do see it that way. Those of us who stand outside the circle of this those of us who stand outside the circle of this society's definition of acceptable person, it is learning how to stand alone, unpopular and sometimes reviled, and how to make common cause with those other identified as outside the structures in order to define and seek a world in which we can all flourish. It is in learning how to take our differences and make them strengths. So when you're resonating with someone and you're talking about resonating with somebody, the other people who resonate with that somebody then resonate with you. And then that brings you into we don't have tribes at the level of, we have ancestral worship, but that's very tribal, and that's good. But at the same time, we don't really have tribes in the way of family tribes anymore. And so our tribes are, who are we in resonance with? What does it mean to be in resonance? And so our tribes are the people that we're in resonance with. We find them through beacons. Beacons are going to be the mother trees, the tap roots, and those are going to be those whose work you love, and for whatever reason, it's going to be either somebody who is trying to get mastery and they're somewhere in that, the mastery to ascended master pipeline, or it's somebody who is passed on in that ascended master that you're working with their work, or it's, there's so many ways to do this, but to be in conversation about what it means for you to understand that you can do this in your own way, and talking about it with each other will help you get there, and believing that you can each do this in your own way, and talking about the different ways that you're trying to do it is going to help you get there too. And so, when you think about what it is to have a psychic ability, what it is to be sensitive, what it is to respond to this kind of material, what it is to resonate with a lot of the philosophy and a lot of the theology and the spirituality and all of the stuff that comes through these readings, to be able to take in some of that richness of the primal worldview and incorporate it into creativity as a spiritual practice, to be able to take what it means to create a container of your faith and have that help you overcome some of this pain and the suffering and the alienation and the fear of speaking and the ramifications of speaking, and then to speak and be able to connect with those who are in resonance with you through that speaking, with those ascended ancestors and those ascended guides and those ascended masters who are helping helping you channel. And in that channel of resonance, you find those others, and in those finding those others, we begin to create together. And so that's sort of what it is to make a common cause with those other identified as outside the structures in order to define and seek a world in which we can all flourish. And that is what the queer community has done by and large and continues to do. But to the extent that those of us who are spiritual, I was talking to someone, I said, we need a W. We need to add that W. The witches are out here, hearing voices and seeing visions, and nobody loves that. You know what I mean? But they are of value. They are a counterculture in a way that is something, and so it's where do we find where we are outside the circle of society's definition of acceptable, and learning how to stand alone, unpopular, and sometimes reviled. And that's where we find our voice and come to common cause with those other identified as outside the structures. This is not easy stuff in any way, shape, or form, and there is going to be pushback, and we kind of have to figure out how to deal with the different places where people are with pain, the different places where people are culturally, what it means to even clash, Kwanzaa, the African American Festival of Harvest, lasts for 7 days. I cut that out because I thought that these definitions of those 7 days of Kwanzaa was when I was talking to Audre Lorde about community standards. She was like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. The indigenous cultures and not just indigenous cultures, but the ascended masters and all the masters that are out there. When we start to talk about what community standards might be, it doesn't have to come all from it comes from our conversations about what has made us feel community, what has made us dream of community, what kind of community we dream of, what it looks like, what it doesn't look like, what we're afraid of, what we've experienced in the tyrannies that we swallow day by day, what's going to happen when someone says something contemptible, how do we handle that, what does it mean to handle it, what does it mean to handle it? I feel like she wants me to find another card. This is how she wants us to handle it. Death. So this is an interesting thing, and it's about the cost of silence. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence, and that might be coming quickly now without regard for whatever I had ever spoken, for whether I had ever spoken what needed to be said or had only betrayed myself into small silences, while I planned someday to speak or waited for someone else's words, and I began to recognize a source of power within myself that comes from the knowledge that while it is most desirable not to be afraid, learning to put that fear into perspective gave me great strength. With that great strength of putting that fear into perspective and say, I'm going to have to be silent when I'm dead. And I might have stuff to say that I want to say, and I'm not going to realize it until later. And maybe I want to start to speak. And then we go, okay, well, what does it mean to speak? Well, it means that you're going to speak from the outside, and you might be outside the circle of society's definition of acceptable when you speak. And then you're going to have to learn how to stand alone and unpopular and sometimes reviled. And then when you do that and you speak from that place, you make common cause with those others identified as outside those structures. Now that tribe is finding you in order to define and seek a world in which we can all flourish. It is learning how to take our differences and make them strengths. And that doesn't mean that you have to put your voice on display at the level of like performance in social media. It means like being in small groups, like on Discord, in anywhere. It doesn't have to be here, it can be anywhere, and making your voice heard in that kind of a back and forth. Because it doesn't have to be in a big way. It's just, what do you have to say? What are the tyrannies that you swallow day by day? Because how we deal with it, when we do this, we confront the cause of silence, that we, fear contempt, we fear censure, we fear judgment. And so this tension about wanting to speak and not being able to, that's two things. You want to speak and you also don't want to be hurt. And those two things in competition, that's massive anxiety. That's massive social anxiety. And so when you say, I accept this feeling, I want to speak and I also don't want to get hurt. So I accept that this is what's going on. I don't have to, be anxious about the fact that I should be more or it should be different, because this is two dueling things that I want at the same time. There's a cost to the silence, but there's also a cost to speaking. How can I navigate this? Because when I say that there's a doomsday scenario in terms of like our creative future with technology that learns how to create from the source of everything, there's nothing doomsday about it. It levels the playing field if you can get together in groups. You're never going to be able to afford it alone. And that's the way that they keep the hierarchy. But if you're in a guild of 200 people, and like, of course there's going to be a battle over this. Of course this is going to be difficult. But if you're sitting in a room with 10 people and you can only afford to buy 10 minutes of something that you want to communicate, the profit might not be that much. It might just be sustenance. It might be that's the way that, that's the workaday job going forward. However, the richness, the wealth, the value is sitting in the hot room with the fans on and putting something together and laughing and loving and eating, rice and beans, and it's delicious and it's funny, and we're going to have this day, and this day is going to mean something because we're going to spend it together and we're going to know each other, and I'm going to know your sense of humor and you're going to know my brilliance, and the mirroring is going to be there, and that is the wealth. And when we know that's the wealth, then it doesn't hurt so much when we put all of this investment into 10 minutes and it only made enough for everybody to just get by. And that might seem like punishment until those things build upon each other, and this team works with that team, and then that team works with that team, and then suddenly what you've got going on is what you dreamed of. And so these dreams are possible. These visions are possible. We have to kind of change the way that we're looking at things. And it gets comfortable in the Four of Swords hide place. It gets comfortable in our little dens. But I'm fearful for the future of all of these systems collapsing, these jobs going away, and then a feeding frenzy at the level of sustenance, both socially, like, and on every other level, because mutually, like, there's so many things that, like, I don't want to scare you, because every single time I look at the tower fall, I also see a way in which community rises up and says, aha, we're going to solve this problem together. And now we have an arena of creativity and an arena of opportunity that has never been before. And you can benefit from it at the level of, it's not all of you are purposed for channeling in a public way, but some of you are purposed for channeling at the level of your special interest, expressing your special interest, expressing your special interest with other people who have that special interest, and then in communication about that special interest, bringing it to the next level of communicating face to face, and then building on that face to face communication, and then just body doubling and eating dinner together, and then from just eating dinner together to playing a board game, and then from playing Hannah gave me this suggestion of board game, and this is good. These are good ideas, right? And so good ideas come from talking. And so I know I've been harping on the same point over and over again, in terms of ecosystem over economy, and even where it was kind of like angry, a lot of that came from the environment that I'm in. I'm channeling the mother here. I'm channeling what it is to be in a position that did the foundational stuff, and now we can move into like more community stuff. That is this is how we channel. We develop a relationship. For me, it's different, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it this other way. The way that I'm doing it right now, I'm aware of Audre Lorde. I can hear her, I can see her, but I can't feel her in my body all the way. My body's very sore, and I'm trying to learn how to just channel without the physical aspect in order to be easier on myself. And so I think you can do this too, and so I think that's where a really good place to kind of, move from community building, from I can offer you this channeling, to community building at the level of, make a deck of your favorite artists' quotes. Make a deck of your own insights as they come to you. Sit down and participate in very intentional interactive prayer from a primal worldview, where belief is permission, connecting with guides. And then whatever fruitful thing comes from that session, make something with it. And when you make something with it, then go share it. And when you share it, you don't share it for, clicks, likes, popularity, the gold rush of exposure that comes from types of performance. You're not making it as a product. You're making it to have a mating call. Cuckoo, cuckoo. You're throwing it out there like a Marco Polo. It's an app where you make videos for friends. You're looking for, you understand the extracted models of social media means that nothing that you say is safe from being repurposed. But the days of that is over. That's going to change. And that doesn't mean that you disrespect the masters or you disrespect your friends. It doesn't mean anything like that. It doesn't mean that it's all going to hell, I don't care anyway. That's not it. The value, the wealth, what it means to make it big in the world and be a breakout star, in your life and be a major success right now is refining your special interest, connecting around that special interest with others that have that special interest, and does not just special interest, in resonance, and let's talk about what resonance is. Let's talk about what I'm talking about. Let's kind of get into conversation with some of these topics, because these topics and how we feel about them and what we think about them, that's fruitful for us getting to know each other. Because then you're going to know that person's opinion and that person's opinion, and if we clash, oh my gosh, then we have an opportunity to get even deeper. And we're not going to be afraid, because we're not going to judge people who are in a different place than we are. We're not going to give anyone a hard time if they have no tolerance for the pain that is overwhelming them, because a lot of people are being tortured by life right now. And those of us that can tolerate pain and then have something to offer, we want to talk about what it means to, develop a rhythm with give and take, with levels of pain tolerance. We want to talk about even wanting to alleviate the pain tolerance and needing somebody to play with and needing some fun and needing to see what that looks like. And what is it to answer a need that is as simple as, I need someone to hang out with, while I fold my laundry. Who has to do laundry and hates doing it alone? Okay, let's do laundry on Wednesdays, we fold day. That's what I'm talking about. And again, you don't have to do it here. Do it wherever you feel most comfortable, wherever you feel most connected. And so I'm going to leave this message here, and I invite you into conversation on this. And I hope that you know that I love you, because it is there. You're all symbols to me in a lot of ways, at the reading level, and sometimes they get frustrated, and I do, and you hear it, because I actually, here's the thing, and I'm just gonna say it like it is, and I'm just not gonna care. I'm gonna say the tyranny that troubles me day to day. what it means to be in your energy, what it means to be connected to your guides, what it means to be in community with your guides, because I am in community with your guides, what it is to be able to feel that connection with these different symbols and have a vague sense sometimes, but not really, you know, because again, like whenever I get a vague sense, I throw up a wall again. I'm very, very, very concerned all the time about the dignity of your privacy, and I will never trespass that, okay? So I don't know any details about anybody's feelings about anything, but a lot of times, you know, I will pick up the energy in the same way you can read about a character in a book and like, you know, feel like an affinity to like a movie that you cry during, you know, like if I pick up on something that you're going through as a symbol, like I want, you know, it is my heart to try and pull you out of any kind of level of comparison and competition, pull you out of any kind of level of trying to make it or break it no matter what, trying to pull you out of all of those little things. It has nothing to do with judging you. It's like, it's a frustration at the level of like, there are people in this collective, and I've said this before I've even written this, I know you guys would be best friends, but I can feel the fever pitch of grief and the loneliness and that breaking point, you know, in some of the symbols. And then I can feel the symbols in this song and this quality. Like I'm a matchmaker like nobody else. You don't even know what I'm capable of with matchmaking. And I can see like the need and the answer in the same location, but both shut down in this Four of Swords place. And then I scream bloody murder, justice, you know what I mean? And it's like, and it just never feels like it's enough. And so like, you know, that's the tyranny of like some of the stuff that I don't really express. Is just like, you know, like to be psychic and not be able to like impose the answer, but like, you know, to also just not know how to like get the solution to happen. That hurts, that's painful, that's hard, that makes me start screaming. And then I feel like I need more people, and then I feel like I need more reach, and then I feel like with more reach that'll help people, you know, connect more, and then, you know, livelier, and then, you know, hope. I don't know. So this is Lisa Lee. I'm gonna leave it here. I do love you all. I don't even know who you are, but I feel these symbols, and I want to help, and I want us, and I can't personally help everyone, but you know, if we sit down and we say like community, this community, that, now we have a chorus going clack 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 clack, we're making a river clack 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 through, and we connect with our ascended masters, and we talk about what we learned from them, and now we have a big pool of resources. So let's leave it there, and I'll see you again soon.